And I'm Terry, and Paul is the videographer and
Hi.
co-presenter.
So I met everybody.
Yes, I did. I did. All right, the topic tonight is self-transformation through the science of yoga. And it's probably going to be a little bit different from what you're used to, so I'm sure you'll be fine. But I like to take a little bit different approach to some of the theosophical topics, so you might find that it's a little different from what you have had in the past as far as speakers that have come to speak to you. Specifically, when I'm referring to the science of yoga, I mean the book by I.K. Taimni, The Science of Yoga. How many of you have read it?
Read parts of it.
Parts of it, okay. Okay. And it was pretty easy to read?
I thought so.
You thought so?
I think there was like a packet that came when I joined, I think.
Oh, okay.
I think every month they would send me a chapter or something.
I see. Most people find it kind of hard to read. But
I thought it was great.
yeah, it is a wonderful book. And it's too bad that more people don't read it. Most people do find it hard to read. The way it's presented is kind of the classical style for Indian works, or Sanskrit works, I should say. He presents the original text in the Sanskrit Devanagari script. Then he presents a very literal, kind of word-by-word translation. And then he does a more modern, looser translation. The ancient Sanskrit texts are so different from modern languages that it's very difficult to translate them in a consistent manner. So if you look at the various translations, you'll see an enormous variety.
Like the Tao Te Ching.
Like the what?
Like the Tao Te Ching.
Yes, of course.
Hundreds of, yeah.
Yes. So it really depends more than anything on the intuitiveness and the insight of the person doing the commentary. I happen to have tremendous respect and admiration for I.K. Taimni. Although he's not one of the easier people to read, he has a very profound insight, and I believe speaks in many cases from personal experience, which makes a huge difference. So, obviously, it is based on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I think everyone knows. Has everyone read one version or another of these? Anyone read the? Okay, the Light of the Soul. All right, that's one of them that I. That's one of the easier ones, I think, to read. Light of the Soul. It is a little more concise, and of course it goes along with the teachings of Alice Bailey, the other books. This apparently was a combined effort. Most of her writings were dictated, for the most part, by the Master D.K. She wrote a few books entirely on her own, but as far as I know, this is the only work that was a combined effort of the two. He provided the Sanskrit translation, she provided the commentary on that one. In I.K. Taimni's case, he did both. He did both the translation, he was a Sanskrit scholar, and he did the commentary. He had a very scientific background. He was a professor of chemistry at the University of Allahabad in India. Had a distinguished career. He, I believe, graduated with a bachelor's degree when he was 16 and a master's degree when he was 18. He was brilliant. He was also very involved in esoteric studies in the Theosophical Society. and was in charge of the esoteric school for a number of years. So he wrote several books, one of which is The Science of Yoga. Another one which is very interesting, and I'll quote from it, is called The Science and Occultism. So he contrasted his own scientific knowledge, specifically about quantum mechanics and quantum physics, and occultism, and how there's not any real disagreement on, in general terms, but how occultism actually predicts and has gone farther than science has. And Paul's a big fan of science programs today. I don't watch TV, but he watches the science programs, and he's finding that science is getting closer and closer to occultism. So that's kind of interesting. All right, the sutras have everything to do with yoga, but a specific form of yoga, and what we might call the original yoga. And specifically it is called Raja Yoga, the royal or the king of yogas. We don't know for sure when the Yoga Sutras were written, hundreds of years ago, possibly a couple of thousand, we don't know. But we do know that they are the first to be written down, and that other schools of yoga were derived from that. So whether it's Bhakti Yoga or Laya Yoga, whether it's Hatha Yoga or Karma Yoga, those all came about later, at least not necessarily the teachings, but as far as being a coherent school of teachings. So Raja Yoga was the first, the others came along after that. Hatha Yoga, and Paul practices it religiously.
Religiously.
Hatha Yoga is only a few hundred years old. I think it came about in the 1300s, if I remember correctly. So, what is yoga? Yoga means union. You all know that. But union of what? Union of what? What are we uniting here? Any idea?
So it was body and mind.
Soul, body, and mind? Okay.
So, yeah, soul personality.
What we're really, actually what we're uniting is the lower self and the higher self. You know, we talk in Theosophy and in Alice Bailey's works, we talk about the personality or the lower self and the soul or the higher self. I like the term soul. They don't use it much in Theosophy, but I like to use it.
So,
I don't use the word ego in the way the older Theosophical works use it, just to be clear. When I speak of ego, I'm talking about the personality, about what psychologists call the ego, and what Eckhart Tolle calls the ego. That, to me, is more understandable than to call the higher self the ego. It's too confusing. So, in my vocabulary, I've restricted that to just the use of the lower self, the personal emotional desires of the lower self. So, uniting the two, which means that we are, and in religion, you talk about religion, we actually use the term, it's a Latin term which means to reunite. It's interesting that both yoga and religion are very similar in meaning. The root, the derivation of the two words means pretty much the same thing, to unite or reunite with something higher, something more divine. So, how do we make this happen? I'm all about practice. It's said that it is said that after you die, there are two doorways. There's one doorway that has a sign on it that says "To Deva Chan," And there's another one that has a sign on it that says lecture about David Chan. And all the Theosophists go into that room. We talk and talk and talk about things, but then we don't do anything about it. Well, I think it's time to stop talking
I agree.
and start doing.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm going to give you a few little tools, and Paul and I are going to give you some little tools about how to make this happen. Let me kind of give you a little background here. We had dinner with Barbara and with Joel before we came over here, and so they know a little bit about how our book came about. But let me just give you a very quick background so the rest of you know a little bit about what we're talking about here. I've been in the Theosophical Society for 38 years or so, and when I founded it, I knew that was my path. I knew that was this type of information that I was looking for. Paul discovered it only 5 years ago, and he had the same reaction. As soon as he saw it and was introduced to it, he knew immediately that this was something of tremendous value and that would influence his life for the remainder of his lifetime. He came to a class that I was teaching on basic theosophy, and a few months later introduced me to the teachings of Eckhart Tolle. I had heard of him but had never read any of his books. So he gave me a copy of A New Earth, and since it was a gift I had to read it. No, I was going to read it no matter what. And as soon as I read the first couple of chapters, I said, this is something.
The first description, I'm in my third reading.
Oh,
the
okay.
very first description of the very first flower,
Mm-hmm.
to me, is magic. I love that book. I think he has a way of bringing complicated, difficult to understand issues to the common man, and that's why I think his book is so popular.
The flower is the enlightenment of the plant kingdom.
Yes, that's right. Well, it also, they said it's the very first thing that ever occurred that only had one purpose.
Which was not utilitarian.
Beauty. That's right.
Yes,
Not utilitarian.
yes.
Just the very first thing on this earth that was not utilitarian. And so that was like the soul. That was like the soul to something greater than the physical. I think the book is a jewel, but
Well, we love it too.
yeah.
We love it so much that after reading it, we started talking about now what do we do? Because while we were discussing it, we said, okay, here's something very practical. He's talking about the ego, how important it is to get rid of the ego, and that it is not easy, that it takes an effort. And on the other hand, we've got Theosophy that has all of the theory and all of the information. Let's combine these two. Let's make a perfect product, the theory and the practice.
Right.
So that's exactly what we did. We taught a study course on the book, A New Earth, but we brought theosophical concepts into it. And we had a group of people who were enthralled with it. A lot of young people were coming, and people of all ages. They absolutely loved it. And so we taught that class for 10 or 11 months, went through the entire book, and afterwards we continued using it in talks and in presentations, but then we thought, we need to get this out to more people. So we wrote a book. And it's exactly, although it's not really mentioned, we don't tell people that that's how the inspiration came about, but it's a combination of Theosophy and teachings of Eckhart Tolle. And we call it Ancient Wisdom for a New Age, a Practical Guide for Spiritual Growth. We've been very pleased with the results of people who have read it. I'm amazed at some of the people who have read it. Some read it just because they're friends of ours, and you know, we tell them we wrote a book. Okay, I'll
They have to read it.
But I'm, you know, I'm really surprised how many people that have never picked up a metaphysical book in their life pick this up and they can't put it down. They're like, I never expected to be able to read a book like this and actually enjoy it. We made it an effort to make it readable. We have two groups of people we're trying to attract as readers of it. Number one is people who know nothing about theosophy or metaphysics, and yet they're seeking something spiritual in nature. The traditional religions are not providing quite the answers that they feel they need, or they feel in many cases that they have outgrown that, and they're looking for something else. And we are finding that some of those people love this, absolutely find that they never expected to find what they were looking for in a book like this. The other group of people we're looking for are aspirants who have meditated and studied for a number of years, but maybe feel that they haven't made the progress that they would like to have made. They're not quite sure how to kind of kickstart the process and actually start seeing some more results. So those are the two, and it's a very different, they're completely different types of people, and yet it seems to work. So we'll see. The book is available in many formats. We've got a softcover edition, a hardcover edition, all of the e-books. It's on Amazon, it's on Barnes & Noble. We have our own website. And we're going to have the Spanish translation later this year. It's a friend of ours in Puerto Rico offered to write the book, to translate it before we even started writing this one. He said, when the book comes out, he said, I want to translate it for you in Spanish. I said, okay, and he's working on it right now. So that's the book.
Just, excuse me, if that's available, Joel, because I think Enrique would be very interested in that.
I think he would.
I don't know if you know Enrique Renard. He basically runs the Theosophical groups down in Florida to mostly Spanish-speaking people. So I think he would be very interested. Yeah.
Well, I am not only a national speaker for the TSA, but also an international speaker for the Inter-American Federation. So I give talks in Spanish in Central America, South America, and Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. In fact, they started inviting me before the TSA did, and it was only, the TSA is a little bit slow, you know, what can I say? When they found out that all these groups were inviting me down there and how much they enjoyed the talks, they said, well, how come you're not talking to our groups? And I said, well, you didn't invite me. So now they've started inviting us to come talk. All right, so let's talk about yoga and the science of yoga. I wanted to mention one thing. I tried to read the science of yoga a number of years ago. I can't even remember how long ago. And when I read a book, I mark it up ruthlessly. I underline things and I make notes in it, and I make my own index in the front part of the book. And I want to be able to go back and read and find things that I found were interesting. So I started reading it. I probably read 2 or 3 chapters, and it got to be a little too abstruse or too difficult for me at the time. I don't remember how many years ago. So I put it aside, left it in the bookshelf for years. And then we wrote our book a couple of years ago. And just recently, just 3 months ago, I took the book out again, read the first part of it, read the rest of it, and I said, this is exactly what we put in our book.
Yeah.
I'm like, people are going to accuse us of plagiarizing, and yet I hadn't even finished reading the book. So A lot of the teachings, as it turns out, that we included in the book are almost exactly what is in the Science of Yoga. So let's see what it is. I think ours is easier to read. I think so. All right, so let's see what some of the things that Taimni has to say about yoga. First of all, what is yoga? According to the Yoga Sutras, it's the inhibition of the modifications of the mind. The inhibition, it's a little strange way of putting it, but that's how they do it sometimes. Yoga is the inhibition of the modifications of the mind. Might make more sense if we use Eckhart Tolle's analogy or his terminology, the voice in the head. Anybody have a voice in the head? Anybody not have a voice in the head?
Especially
This
at 3 o'clock in the
constant
morning.
conversation that goes on. Yeah, we all know. It just chatters and chatters. And when is it most prominent? When you sit down to meditate.
The voice in the silence.
And yeah, that's exactly why it's called the voice of the silence. You have to first silence that voice in the head before you can meditate. Yeah, so that voice just goes on and on and on until you learn to turn it off. And it's not easy at all. It's not easy. And until you learn how to do it, you can't really meditate. So, inhibiting the modifications of the mind, or turning off the voice in the head. He says also, among other things, the science of yoga cannot be mastered in one lifetime.
Oh, that's good to know.
Comforting.
Oh, that's the answer. That's why.
Yeah.
It
Now I have
cannot
to
be
excuse-
mastered in one lifetime, but only in a succession of strenuous lives devoted exclusively to the yogic ideal. Wow. Okay, it's looking a little tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
Those who are impatient and cannot adopt this long-term view are not yet qualified to enter this path and make steady progress towards their goal. All right, so does that mean we have to all become monks? Well, almost. It almost means that, but he also says that you take baby steps. You're not going to do it all at once. And if you become impatient because you're not making great progress, you're going to just lose out on the whole thing because you give up before you ever get started. Just realize that it's not a 6-month process or a 20-year process. It's a 3 or 4 lifetime process. We need to set our goals way into the future, way into the future. And we need to be clear about what it is we want to accomplish, and then everything we do in this lifetime should help move us towards that as much as possible. Now, we can't just throw aside our karma. We can't just discard it. A lot of New Age people think you can. They, number one, want to escape from the troubles and the difficulties of life, which, if they're honest, they created them in former lifetimes or in this one, so they're responsible for it. And yet, they're hoping that they somehow can just ignore it and just run away from it. Well, you can only do that temporarily, and then life takes that hook and pulls you back and says, no, deal with it. You created it, now you deal with it. So we have to deal with our karma. Paul's going to tell us about something about the types of karma that we create. What do you have to say about that?
So there's some ideas on karma that we're going to share to make it a little bit more clear and kind of describe the task at hand according to Taimni, because it does sound slightly daunting, and it definitely is if it takes more than one lifetime. I mean, who plans that far in advance? I have a hard time planning my next year's business goals, let alone the weekly schedule. So planning 3 lifetimes in advance is tremendous, but I think that's very healthy to stretch your brain that way. And it just naturally helps us raise our consciousness, because when we realize that we survive the personality when our physical body dies, and we're going to come back and pick up that suitcase of karma again. We should start preparing for that and maybe changing some things right now in this lifetime in order to make our next several lifetimes more in line with the ultimate goal, which is to regain complete seamless unity with everything, with all of humanity, all of life, everything. So some ideas on karma. When a new human soul is created and we enter a human incarnation for the first time, there is no karma for us. There's no personal karma yet. Animals don't create karma, plants don't create karma, and minerals sure as heck don't create karma since they don't have free will. And karma is a tool that's given to the human kingdom to help keep us in line. I like to look at it like those bumpers that are put in the bowling alley. So if you're a bowling ball rolling and you're kind of just a new human getting bumped back and forth, sometimes it's not that gentle, sometimes the bumpers aren't even there and you might almost fall off a cliff, kind of. So when a new human soul incarnates in a physical personality for the first time, we start creating personal karma for ourselves. And that personal karma accumulates over all our lifetimes. I'm sure everyone knows this from studying Theosophy. And it's not in terms of negative and positive karma, it's just karma that usually creates more suffering than pleasure, because when you're a brand new human, you don't have it figured out yet. We don't understand how life works, that there's a flow to life, and so we make mistakes, but that's the whole point, is to make mistakes and learn. Once we reach a certain level of development, and we realize there's a path and we can imagine what the top of the mountain looks like, we can start working to eliminate some of the karma we've been creating for ourselves. So when we enter into each lifetime, each human incarnation, we pick up that suitcase of karma that we've created throughout all of our past lifetimes. Each lifetime also has a set amount of that karma that we are expected to work through in that particular lifetime. That's evident in the location on the planet that we're born, the family situation we're born into, the time of human the people that we are finding ourselves interacting with through that particular lifetime. Those things are relatively set forth for you in order to work through during that lifetime. And it's up to us to recognize opportunities to work through karma and equalize it, so we don't have to keep working on it later and relearning certain lessons or retrying to learn lessons. So we pick up the suitcase of karma, and a particular amount is allotted for us in this particular lifetime. Also, we create new karma in every lifetime, so it's our duty to be careful not to create too much that we have to work through, or else we're just going to keep adding to that suitcase. So we have the total store of karma through all of our lifetimes, the particular amount for the lifetime that we're in, and then any new karma that we're creating in that lifetime. So those are some ideas on the types of karma that we accumulate and that we work through.
Very good. And some people are very good at working through karma, so good that they may actually be able to take on a little bit more than what they were supposed to. Some people don't do very well, and so half of what they were supposed to work through, or maybe a lot more than that, maybe 90% didn't actually get worked through. That just gets added on to the next life again. But plus whatever they created in this lifetime. So at the end of any lifetime, you've either decreased your total karma if you've made a real effort at it, or you've increased the total karma. Either way. And really only somewhat enlightened people, and who are really making an effort towards that, decrease it. So anyone who thinks that you can have a magic karma eraser, life doesn't work that way. And fortunately for us, I tell people, don't dare try to take away my karma. I need that. That's what keeps me in the path. That's what teaches me the lessons of life. That's how I learn. I can't learn without karma. It's kind of like a child that doesn't have any parameters. Parents just let it run wild, and there are no consequences. Oh, you don't want to go to school? Okay, don't go to school. You want to eat cake and candy for breakfast? Sure, no problem. Whatever you want. children need parameters, they need guidelines, and people need guidelines. Well, that guideline is called karma. It keeps bringing us back and trying to show us how the laws of nature work. We're like, oh no, I don't, that's too hard. I want to play and have fun. And while you're playing and have fun has consequences. You know, it seems fun for a while, but then there are some consequences, and sometimes it results in pain and suffering and illness and sorrow. That's the message of all teachers, all spiritual teachers, is that there is pain, there is suffering, there is sorrow, but guess what? You created it. You use your mind and your emotions to create that, the situation, so you can also use that same mind to control your emotions and to figure out how to eliminate that. So, the goal, as far as karma, yes?
Yeah, so for example, I always think about that when children are born with some terrible disease.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's what they took on in order to
Absolutely.
learn fast, or?
We all know that when a child is born, that child, as far as this lifetime, cannot even start to make karma until about 7 years old. That's approximately the age at which that personality has achieved enough consciousness in the new body that they can start making new karma. So as far as this lifetime, they're completely innocent, but they're not completely innocent from previous lifetimes. We all, regardless of how cute the little baby is, that baby comes with a satchel of karma, just like Paul said. So we can't see it. And people are shocked when I say this, but I'll tell you. If we could see all of our previous lifetimes, we would just turn beet red. We would turn beet red. We've all been rapists and murderers and thieves and heaven knows what in previous lifetimes. And if you can wrap your head around that, you begin to understand why we do not judge people or situations and assume that we should be able to understand it based on appearances. We don't have the information. The adepts, the Mahatmas, time and again reminded Sinnott and A.O. Hume, you judge everything based on appearances. We do not, because we have the ability to see much further and from a very different viewpoint. We can see all of the karma that is involved. We can see all of the past causes that have resulted in the present situation. We have that ability, you do not. Therefore, why would you judge something? You're going to be wrong. It's that simple. Because you don't have the ability or the information to do it. And there's no reason to. It just creates more trouble when you judge it. This is one of the three qualities that Eckhart Tolle suggests developing. He didn't flesh it out very well in his book. We took it and we ran with it. Three things that he mentions: non-judgment, non-reaction, and non-attachment. Non-judgment, non-reaction, and non-attachment. If you can develop to a large degree those three things, you are almost perfect. You're on the very verge of adeptship. Now, when we're talking about goals, these long-range goals, how many of you have the goal of becoming an adept? Anybody? Well, I'm hoping to change that tonight. I'm hoping to change that. What is your spiritual goal? Anybody want to tell us what their spiritual goal is?
I guess for me, it's just to feel the connection.
To feel
that was always been difficult for me, just to feel that connection.
With your higher self.
Yes.
Okay. So beginning the process, opening up that antakarana, the connection with your higher self. That's perfectly good goal, and is part of the meditation. I'm suggesting that you do a 3 or 4 lifetime plan, like Paul's talking about here, and make your goal to become an adept.
In 3 lifetimes?
Very, pardon?
An adept in 3 lifetimes?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Could you define adept? What is that?
Sure. Very good. Adept is one who has transcended the human kingdom, who has graduated from the human kingdom. The consciousness that resides in each one of us went through all the other kingdoms, the mineral, vegetable, and the animal kingdom, and there's an entire process. It starts at the low end of consciousness for that kingdom. It works its way through via different types of experience, and at some point it graduates from that kingdom into the next one. So, when we were in the animal kingdom, we started out as a slug or an amoeba or who knows what, and we graduated when we got to be maybe an elephant or a lion or a chimpanzee, I don't know, but one of the higher animals in the animal kingdom. We all had some kind of experience all through that entire range of consciousness. And at some point, life says, okay, you've reached the pinnacle for that kingdom. There's really not any more that you can learn in that kingdom. You need a new existence that gives you the opportunity. You can't just stay in grade school forever, can you? I mean, you can if you want, but what would be the point? There's no material, there's nothing. You've reached the pinnacle of grade school. Why would you stay there? You've got to go now to college, university, and then postgraduate study. You've got to keep moving. You don't ever stop. So it's the same with our consciousness. Some of us have made some tremendous progress in previous lifetimes. And some of us are ready, if we make this strenuous effort over several lifetimes, to achieve the level of an adept. As you're going to see, when you reach the highest level of samadhi, that means that you either are an adept or are very close to becoming an adept, because you can't achieve that without having achieved all of the raising of consciousness and the purification of your vibrations necessary to make that happen. So, think about it. Think about it if that isn't maybe a goal that you can put in place to work on towards for the remainder of this lifetime and the next 3 or 4 to come. Think about it. Now, we'll give you
have to do it.
yes.
Do you really think that that the road to adeption is linear, where you have to go up a stairway? I mean, there's people that have gotten through elementary school, gone on to college, and passed that with all kinds of degrees that haven't really learned elementary stuff.
Well, I understand your point. What we're talking about here is expansion of consciousness, or what Eckhart Tolle likes to say, enlightenment. Actually, this is a good point, right? Let's talk about enlightenment or expansion of consciousness. And the question is it linear, like Cindy asked? Is it step by step by step? Or can there be, for example, a quantum leap? You've all heard of quantum leap in consciousness, and Eckhart Tolle talks about that in his own case. He was 29 years old, had suffered from depression. You probably remember his story, for a number of years, and studied psychology at Cambridge, and several times was suicidal. He had a very, very difficult early childhood and early adulthood. And he woke up one morning and everything had changed. All of a sudden, none of this gloom or depression existed anymore for him. It was as if his consciousness had gone from point A to point Z all at once, overnight. Woke up and he wasn't even the same person he was the night before. And he was stunned, shocked. But it was incredible. It was amazing. He could feel the life energy and felt a connection with everything that he didn't feel ever before. Yes.
But see, I was thinking more reverse, where the person was educated, they understood all of the theories, they got all that, they had it all charted out, but they never really felt something until they went back to something very basic, and then they got it. They connected on a different level with something or someone. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, in other words, you're up here and then all of a sudden you go back down to something extremely childlike and basic and feel.
There are many different aspects to this, and you have to kind of absorb all of them at once. One thing in the Bible, Jesus said, unless you become as a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And this pertains absolutely to this path, or this, to the yogic process that we have to go through if we're going to achieve. One of it is that, and what he's talking about is this purification. A child is innocent in this lifetime, is completely innocent, doesn't create karma, doesn't have all of the emotional, physical desires that most of us have. We kind of train them to have those as they go, unfortunately. But they start out innocent, and then as they get older and older, all of that changes. We have to go back to that state of innocence, but still retain all of the experience that we have as adults. Keep that childlike quality of innocence, not creating any negative karma, and this awe that children have, this amazement at all of life. They're just in awe of it. That's what we have to recreate as adults. And fearless. Exactly. So we have to look at it in many different ways. Another point is, I'll get to in just a second, is that life has us repeat things many, many times, and for a reason. When you start out as a baby, you have almost no consciousness, and you have to develop that slowly over a period of time. Why would we have to do that 700 or 800 times, time after time after time? It's like we've already been through it. Well, you didn't get it the first 600 times. Every single time that you are cribbed, cabined, and confined down to the state of a little tiny infant, there are new things that you learn that you missed the first several hundred times. And look at a book that you read. Do you get it all the first time? Never, ever. You have to read it 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 times. Every single time you read it, you find new things in it.
Now I also feel like sometimes I feel like I have advanced, and then I feel like, I don't know, something else came in and that was actually more feasible to me to believe and to work with. And you always feel like you advance and then you're thrown back, and then you go a little different direction.
That's an illusion.
That's an illusion.
It's an illusion. And it depends on your point of view. And you're absolutely right. It often feels like that you've taken a step backward, but you can never really take a step backward. Even our failures teach us. That's how we learn from our failures. You only fail when you stop making any effort. And when you stop observing and analyzing what went on in the past. I tell people, look at your friends and neighbors and family. Look at some of the mistakes they make. You don't have to make every single mistake yourself. You can learn from other people's mistakes. And if you're paying attention, you'll eliminate a whole lot of problems for yourself. Now, Barbara.
I wanted to go back to having adeptship as a goal. I'm just wondering, I know that at times the Tibetan has said not to have your own spiritual growth as a goal because of the danger of spiritual ambition, and that you should focus on study, meditation, and service, and the progress will come. But if you're focused on, I want to be an adept, it's like a trap. It can become a trap.
It can, and in fact, I don't have the quote right at hand, and I'm not going to look for it, but I think we'll find it later. In the science of yoga, it says that you have to have a goal, but you can't. Oh, I do know where it came from, I think. Hold on a second here. It actually came from the Mahatma letters. Let me find that. I'll just read the whole thing because part of it will apply later to another topic here. In a letter to A.P. Sinnott, K.H. says, each warmer and quicker throb of the heart wears so much of life away. He's talking about controlling the emotions. The passions, the affections, are not to be indulged in by him who seeks to know, for they wear out the earthly body with their own secret power, and he who would gain his aim must be cold, meaning without passions. He must not even desire too earnestly or too passionately the object, meaning his spiritual goal he would reach. Else, the very wish will prevent the possibility of its fulfillment, or at best retard and throw it back. So yes, that's exactly. You have to have the goal, but it can't be this ardent desire, because then you turn it into a personal, emotional desire. It's got to be just kind of this, you know what the goal. I tell people, keep it at the back of your mind. That's where I want to be. And then take care of what's in front of you. But never forget that that goal is at the back of your mind, and life will just help you do everything necessary to learn and to eliminate whatever needs to be eliminated, and before you know it, the goal will be right in front of you.
What's the most important step?
What's the most important step in your spiritual path?
First one.
Reflection.
But there is no first one. We've always been on the path. What is the most important step? And Eckhart Tolle says this. The one you're on right now. That's the only, in fact, it's the only step. There's only one step, and that's this one you're taking right now.
When you were talking a minute ago, even though it's kind of a silly movie, Groundhog Day, I think is such an important movie, because I forget how many times he said hundreds of times he was waking up, and he was learning one quote, virtue after another virtue after another virtue, and it wasn't until his heart changed that he stopped waking up. So, kind of to do what you were saying, you can learn and learn and learn and learn and learn and learn, but there's only one thing that's going to make any difference. And that's when this changes, and then that's that. And I don't, other than to me reflection and continually just watching what I'm doing, that's hard. That's a hard thing to change. But I honestly, I think the movie's right. I think that's when things, that's when your progress takes place. All the do's that you do don't mean anything until this changes place.
It's very difficult to put into words exactly how to make this happen. It's very easy to get a little bit, misunderstand something and discount it. Words are all we've got to work with, but they're treacherous because they can never convey truth. All they can do is kind of give a little hint here and there. So we have to figure it out for ourselves, and all the teachers tell you that. The masters constantly say that. No one can make you into an adept. You have to make it happen. You do every step of the way, you make it happen. So what is an adept? To answer is someone who has graduated from the human kingdom, and different pathways open up at that point, and only one of them is to be what we call an adept, someone who comes back. They may or may not choose to come into a physical body. That's optional. But they come back in order to help humanity, and not just humanity, but all life. Plant, animal, mineral even. And not even that, but also the Deva kingdom as well. And the elementals. All of them. All life. Their life is dedicated to helping the evolution of this life on this planet.
So in other words, Jesus came back to
Yes.
teach us. So would that be a type of person
Well,
coming back?
whether or not Jesus was an adept in that incarnation in Palestine, I don't know. I don't think he was quite at that point. He may be now. But any of the adepts who do come back make a tremendous sacrifice. And here's the problem. There aren't very many of them. In fact, probably just a few dozen. A few dozen for 60 billion souls. 60 billion souls and only a few dozen adepts. And at the time of the Mahatma letters, KH said, right now our numbers are dwindling. Meaning that obviously the need was so great for them, certain of them, to be used in other realms of development that they were actually leaving our system. And the number of, and they were graduating from it. They were going on to other realms of service. And so there's an enormous need for adepts right now.
Job openings.
Yeah.
A lot of
It's like a bodhisattva
Well, the bodhisattva
in some ways.
Yes,
is,
there you go.
is very high. That's right below the Buddha as far as enlightenment. So we have millions of people who have made a certain amount of progress spiritually and are in desperate need of a little bit of guidance and some help along the way, but we have almost no teachers. So there's this huge disconnect, this huge gap. And according to the teachings of Alice Bailey, a window has been opened at this current time. The opportunity to make very rapid progress has been given to us if we choose to. And then after a period of time, that window will close. I mean, we're talking not, tomorrow, but probably a few hundred or even 1,000 years. That window will close, and then it will only continue at the normal rate of evolution that all of humanity is evolving on. So there is an opportunity right now that isn't normal.
I think it's initiation.
That's part of it.
You mentioned they sacrifice the adepts to come back down. Is that correct in what
Yes.
I heard? What did they sacrifice to come back down?
Well,
And isn't that part of what they were trying to achieve, to become someone that can do that, to help other people?
well, when they become an adept, there are 7 different paths that open. One of them is to become a member of the Deva kingdom. That is certainly a much easier and in some ways more rewarding endeavor and job than coming back to this physical earth and working with human beings. We're really recalcitrant beings. It's like herding kittens when you're trying to work with humans. We're just all over the place. We have our agendas, we have our desires, and for them to try to work with us and especially if they choose a physical body, who would not choose to live in a much finer, refined body than what this physical body is, where you could travel instantaneously? For them to come back into a physical body and it's a severe limitation, for one thing. Yes, they can escape from it at night and whenever they choose to raise their consciousness, but they still have this responsibility. It has to be fed, it has to be clothed, it has to rest, it's a physical body. Anybody who tells you that these bodies don't need food, they're mistaken. They need the same sorts of things that any physical body does.
But that's selfless to do that, to come back down.
It's what?
It seems more selfless
Well,
to
it
come
is
back down
selfless.
to help than to go to some spa.
No,
and
it's
stuff.
absolutely selfless. That's why we call it a sacrifice.
Well,
It-
They're doing work in those
You know,
other paths.
If
well,
you,
what kind of work? Because that's what I'm not getting. I'm
Okay.
getting,
I don't know.
I'm getting
What is the
that.
Deva kingdom? What
Yeah.
consists
the
of?
angels, angelic
Oh,
kingdom.
the angelic kingdom.
Oh, okay.
No, there are other types. It's sort of like, you know, if you're given an opportunity of working in New York or Mumbai or the black hole of Calcutta, which one are you going to go to? Well, the sacrifice would be to go to work with the lepers and the poor people and the slums and the filth. And yes, that would be the greatest sacrifice. So that's probably a good analogy, is that that's where the greatest need is. And so you make the sacrifice like Mother Teresa did and said, okay, I'll sacrifice, I'll go there. The other nuns go to convents, they, you know, live in major cities. But she said, no, I'll go work with the poor people. So that's an analogy of what the adepts do. We need the help so desperately, and they make that sacrifice to help us. So there's an enormous need. There's an opportunity for those who are ready to raise their hand and say, okay, I'll do whatever it takes to get there. And then the work begins. Trial after trial after trial. Now, let me back up just a little bit and talk about enlightenment, because enlightenment is nothing more than increase in consciousness. And that's a normal state of affairs. Everyone is enlightened to a certain degree. They have a certain degree of consciousness. So, it's a little bit silly to say someone is enlightened and someone's not. All you can really say is someone is more enlightened than someone else maybe. And we're all on the path to a greater and greater degree of enlightenment. When we reach a certain point, then we have graduated from the human kingdom. We have stopped making any new karma. We have eliminated or balanced all of our old karma, and we're ready for something new, which may be to come back as an adept. That's only one possibility. So enlightenment is nothing more than the increase in consciousness. Now this sudden enlightenment that Eckhart Tolle had is, well, let me just read it for you. This is from another book of I.K. Taimni, what I mentioned, Science and Occultism. And in the preface of this book, he says, there is yet another method of gaining knowledge concerning the deeper realities of existence. This is through initiation. When knowledge is imparted from one who knows and has the necessary power and authority to do so, to a qualified disciple, by temporarily raising the receptivity of the latter by occult means. Temporarily raising the receptivity of the latter, the disciple, by occult means. Owing to this artificial sensitivity induced in this manner, the consciousness of the recipient is temporarily raised to a higher level and is able to perceive the particular truth as a direct experience in consciousness. This kind of sensitivity does not, however, last, and is not under one's control, as it has been induced temporarily by an external agency, by the descent of particular kinds of forces in the vehicles, by esoteric methods. But it generally sets in motion processes which culminate in the capacity to gain these realizations voluntarily and by one's own efforts. This is really the realm of yoga. Wow. Okay, so now at least we have a little clearer understanding of what an initiation is. Those who have experienced it almost invariably refer to it as an act of grace. I don't normally share this, but I have had this happen twice in my life. And as far as I know, I'm the only one that I am personally aware of who actually had it twice in one lifetime. A few people have had it once in a lifetime, and most people not at all. But in October 1979, and then again in October of 2005, this sort of thing happened to me. The first time I had gone to Alcott, first time I had ever visited there, and I spent the weekend there attending a seminar, and it was all wonderful, and I was, feeling the energy and everything. I was on the plane on a Monday morning going back to Las Vegas, and at some point on the plane, I was stunned. I had the same realization that Eckhart Tolle did. Something had changed drastically. I was not the same person I was the night before. And in the days after that, I had a hard time even operating in my normal life. I was selling real estate at the time, like Paul was, and I could hardly do my work because my thoughts and my ideas and everything was so on a different plane of existence that I didn't know what to do. What I did find was that it decreased over time, just like Taimni says, and I thought, no, I don't want that to decrease. I want that to stay there. That's an incredible, I could, just one example, when in our study group, when somebody would ask a question about something, even if I didn't know the answer myself, all I had to do was pause momentarily and reflect on it, and the answer came. I knew within a few seconds what the answer was to it. And I thought, well, where did that come from? I have no idea. Nothing ever said this is where it comes from, but I had the answer. And at many other things, I could just tune into a person's vibration. It was overwhelming, actually, because I felt all of the emotional feelings that people were feeling, even at a distance sometimes. And it got to be almost completely overwhelming. I hadn't learned yet to dampen that and not to react to it. So that was one of the things I had to learn. But
You're under the spirit.
Pardon?
You're under the spirit.
Well, I realize now that I had, touched the level of the soul, and that's where that understanding was coming
That's
from.
what they call lois, right?
And
lois.
it diminished though over time, and so I thought, well, what do I do to maintain that? So I said, well, it seems to have happened at Alcott, so I gave up my business pursuits. I rented out my house and I moved back to Alcott. I said, I want to work here, so I, took out a job there, lived there on the premises, and for a year and a half did everything possible to try to keep that there. Well, it still continued to decline, and after a year and a half, something within me said, okay, you've had enough time as a monk, because I kind of lived as a monk there, and it's time to get back out in the real world. So I was pushed back out into the real world, back to Las Vegas, and took up a whole different pursuit. And that, you know, took a number of years. I got into many other things, but I never lost that idea in the back of my mind as to what my real goal was. And then again in 2005, in October, the same thing happened. I woke up one day and I said, oh my gosh, the same thing has happened again. So that is what this quantum leap in consciousness is. Now, let me point out, there is no such thing, as far as I can tell, as far as I've been able to ascertain, no such thing as instant enlightenment. There are these initiations that take place, but as Tiny points out, you, the aspirant, have to recreate it yourself. It's a gift, yes. It's like someone says, let me touch you and open your spiritual sight for just a little bit so that you experience this, so you have an idea of what it is you're trying to attain. But it doesn't maintain by itself. You have to make it happen. So that's why it's often called an act of grace. Tim Boyd had an experience just like that when he was young, in his 20s. And it happened in New York City, in the park. He was in the park one day and realized that his consciousness had completely changed. I talked to him for several hours about this. A lady I know, another TS member in Hawaii, had the same thing happen. I know a man from Sri Lanka who lives in Henderson, one of the towns near Las Vegas, who had the same thing happen when he was 18 years old. And I've read a few other instances, and they all describe exactly the same thing. A sudden jump in consciousness, and then this gradual diminishing. So,
I have found in my life that I was, pointed in the direction where to go. Just like I was an atheist, or so I believed. And about 22 years ago, I went to a church, to a Unitarian church, because I wanted my daughter to hear something, because I figured just because I'm not interested in, I'm not religious, maybe I have to show something to my daughter. And I was there and I picked up a pamphlet and it says, join us for A Course in Miracles. And I went in there and I was there for 10 minutes and I knew that was my niche. And I was there for years.
Yeah. And then at some point we graduate.
At some point, I'm not there anymore.
Exactly. And we all, if we're open to it, and that's very important, I'm glad you pointed that out, Ursula, is to be open to this. Too many times when we think, oh, I have to have goals in life, immediate goals. That's why I say keep that ultimate goal in mind, in the back of your head, but leave the rest kind of open to life, to guide you towards it.
It's like let go and let God type of thing?
Yeah. I tell people life is much smarter than you are. It knows what you need. You know what you want, but life knows what you need. So let life be the guide. You just do what's in front of you, take care of immediate karma, and then let life guide you. I moved away from Las Vegas 3 times. It kept saying, okay, no, your work is in Las Vegas. Keep moving me back there. And finally I said, okay, I give up. I'm supposed to be here. I'm not going anywhere. And you just make it that your attitude in life. That you don't create any new karma, that you don't have any personal desires, but the desire to continue your path towards this ultimate goal. And life will lead you. It will say, okay, I've gone for years sometimes without reading any books at all. Just lost all interest in reading. And then a few years ago, for example, I couldn't stop reading. One book after another, and once I finished one book, I had no idea which the next one was, and I'd look, and open it up and
Cycles.
it goes right into it. And I knew the Alice Bailey books. Many years ago I had a whole bunch of them. Couldn't get anything out of any of them. I tried to read them, nothing. I finally sold them all. And then a few years ago I bought a couple of them and had them on my shelf. I picked them up one day and all of a sudden I can understand it. All of a sudden it's meaningful. And now I had to rebuy all of those books that I got rid of. But I bought hardcover copies this time, so that's okay.
Well, that life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans.
Exactly.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I read book after book after book when I started my Course in Miracles. And you know, I felt like a kid in the candy store because all these new things came towards me that I had no clue of. And then I stopped reading. Just the same thing.
Mm-hmm. All right, okay, so let me just state at this point that if your ultimate goal is to become an adept and you're not personally attached to that goal, it's just a goal that's out there that you put out into the universe, how do we get there now? What do we need to do to start working towards that? Well, Eckhart Tolle has some very good ideas about how to get rid of the ego. Well, let's see what the science of yoga has to say about it. It says, for example, the basic idea underlying the whole philosophy of yoga is the destruction of the I, capital I, consciousness. Getting rid of the ego. Most people think it's all about me, right? It's all about my needs. When they say needs, it's really emotional needs, isn't it? We have a lot of needy people in the world. But most of it is personal, emotional needs, and it has everything to do with ego. Has everyone read A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle's book? How many have read it?
Part of it I've read.
Yeah. Well, just be aware that that is really a major part of our own book. So if you want, go back and review that book again, because we got so much insight from that.
Now, he's written a couple before that too, though, right?
Power of Now.
Power of Now.
He wrote that. Power of Now was the first one.
Right. I thought that was awkward.
You thought it was awkward?
For me it was.
Are they the same ideas though? Then
No.
No.
They're different, and we actually incorporate both of them in our book. So I think we explain the Power of Now better than he does in some ways, and we do it in one chapter instead of a whole book.
He just kept repeating, it's like he did it like in the first 2 chapters, and then after that it was kind of like
exactly
he was repeating, and I didn't even finish the book because I said, okay, you've already said it 3 or 4 times, But New Earth to me was
I agree.
It was a gem, every word in it. Yeah.
Read as far as the Power of Now. Read the chapter in our book, but I do recommend that you reread or read for the first time A New Earth.
Yeah.
So, getting rid of the ego. Now, does that mean eliminated the personality? Not entirely, but most people would think that it was. It's for most people, their personality is very much wrapped up in their personal desires, their love of TV, their love of drama, their love of shopping, their love of their relationships, the love of power, love of money, whatever it is. That's all emotional desire. So if that's your idea of your personality, you're going to have to get rid of all of that. You're going to have to cut it to the core. And for most people, that's a little daunting. Let me read one more quote here from Timing. The yogic technique has to be adopted as a whole and not piecemeal. If, for example, the ordinary desires have not been eliminated and are merely curbed, it is impossible to practice samadhi. we're going to learn that samadhi is the pinnacle, the last stages of meditation. These desires will continue to exert unconscious pressure and throw up all kinds of images in the mind. And it will not be possible to maintain under these conditions the uninterrupted and tranquil state of the mind in which samadhi can be practiced. A mind under strain, which may be inappreciable, is quite unfit for the practice of samadhi. So even though we think that we kind of have these desires under control, a lot of times they've simply been suppressed. They haven't been eliminated. We kind of stuff them back. But every once in a while they'll pop up and rear their ugly head, and then you know. Just as a concrete example, I was in Dominican Republic recently, and my host was this TS member for many years, and he's this seemingly very calm, placid, easygoing individual. He was driving us to the location for the weekend retreat we were doing, and some beggar in the street, when he stopped at a stoplight, kept trying to wash the window for him, you know. He said, "No, go away." And the guy then comes around and washes the side window, and he rolls down the window and screams, just loses it, just loses his, and there were three of us in the car, and we're just kind of like, oh my God, what? And this seemingly person who had everything very calm obviously didn't. It had been suppressed. And so under this circumstance, he lost it. And he later apologized, but you can't take it back. What happens, happens.
Right.
So it was simply an indicator that he had not controlled it, he had only suppressed it. And many people do that. You've got to actually eliminate it. That's why when we say non-reaction, it has to absolutely be non-reaction. Somebody does something that normally would make you get very angry, nothing. Nothing happens. You don't get angry, no reaction whatsoever.
I think it's going to take more than 3.
All right, we'll give you. Sorry. All right, Barbara gets 6 now. All right, aspirants who are not familiar with the realities of yogic life plunge directly into the practice of meditation without any preparation whatsoever, and then wonder why they do not make any progress. So the preparation is far more important than most people realize. All right, so we've got some work cut out for us.
What would be the practice be?
Well, we're going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
We're going to get to that. All right, let me at this point go directly into one of the things that has given us some insight. This is something that HPB wrote right near the end of her life. In fact, nobody knows when she wrote it or if she shared it with anyone. It was certainly not published anywhere during her lifetime.
Before you go to that, let me just say I think it's 8:30. How are we doing on time?
Oh.
It's 8:30.
I think we're going to make the later train unless... I have no problem with that. Do you guys want to continue or make it shorter?
No, make it short. No, continue.
Continue, okay.
I mean, if that's
Till
okay.
when I'm gonna have to leave.
Okay.
Okay.
That's why I'm just gonna.
Yeah, whenever you need to, if anyone needs to leave, but if the rest of you want to stay a little bit later, there's some very interesting things we'd like to cover.
Okay.
And we have no problem with staying later unless Barbara needs to get to bed early.
No, I mean, if everybody wants to stay, then just
How much
stay.
later are you talking?
What time is the meeting?
2 o'clock in the morning.
Normally about 8:45.
Oh,
It's
okay.
15 minutes.
Oh,
Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Do you want to stick with that?
That's fine.
8:45?
Yes.
I would
Okay.
say just go.
All right, let's do that then. Let's keep it simple. All right. This is something that HPB wrote, And she said, all of this information, by the way, is in the book. So, there is a road, steep and thorny, beset with perils of every kind, but yet a road, and it leads to the very heart of the universe. I can tell you how to find those who will show you the secret gateway that opens inward only and closes fast behind the neophyte forevermore. There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. 3 qualifications you need to develop.
Can you read those 3 again, please?
There is no danger that dauntless courage cannot conquer. I'm going to give you a copy of this, by the way. There is no trial that spotless purity cannot pass through. There is no difficulty that strong intellect cannot surmount. For those who win onwards, there is reward past all telling, the power to bless and save humanity. For those who fail, there are other lives in which success may come. So that to me sounds pretty much like the goal of yoga. And she kind of pretty much nails what qualifications we need to develop. If you take those 3 qualifications plus non-reaction, non-judgment, and non-attachment, that will get you all the way through. It really will. If you work very strenuously on developing all of those qualities, you'll make it. But you have to, it has to be undertaken with greater devotion and greater intent than any Olympic wannabe has ever done. It is strenuous. I can vouch for that fact, and there's trial after trial after trial that comes to you when you decide that's what you want to do.
What's that story about the drowning, about putting the man's head in the water?
Oh yes, I forget which philosopher it was. Yes, he said, yes, I want to achieve, it was that he wanted to achieve enlightenment or learning, and he said, so he held his head underwater and he almost drowned. He says, why did you do that? And he said, when you really wanted as much as you wanted air at that moment, then you will get it. You have to be willing to do whatever it takes, and just laser-like, be absolutely sure of what your goal is, and not be swayed by one iota, no matter what happens, and no matter how difficult it gets. People fail to realize just how difficult it is, but it is possible. The amount of progress we can make in a single lifetime is far more than you might imagine. But it only happens if you are completely focused on it. All right, well, Paul was going to do more of the presentation, but we have run out of time, and I talked way too much. So, any other questions before we?
There's some time left.
Yeah.
How much time do you think?
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. Let's very quickly then talk about the actual stages of yoga. Why don't you tell us?
Actually, a meditation. I'll see.
Oh yes. I'm sorry about meditation.
Okay, so we're talking a lot about eliminating the ego, which causes a tremendous hindrance for our spiritual growth. The ego exists in our lower self. It's an energy field or entity that Eckhart Tolle describes that exists in our lower self, which is our physical body, our etheric body, our emotional body, and the lower mental body. So in Theosophical technical terms, those are the parts of the human being that comprise our lower self. The higher self is where our soul exists, and on upward through the Buddhic plane, the Atmic plane, and then above that. So we typically operate polarized or oriented through our lower self. We use our physical eyes, our physical ears, our skin to touch things in the physical world. Our consciousness is usually rooted in this physical world. That's what we think is normal. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can shift our polarity to operate through our soul. We can talk about it as operating with a soul consciousness. There's no ego involved with soul. There's nothing coarse or rough at that level, and everything is pure and fine, and that's where tremendous spiritual growth can occur, and only beauty and bliss exist at that level. We can learn to operate from that level, from the soul level, and we do that through practicing meditation. I think when we say the word meditation, almost everyone has a slightly different idea of what that actually is, specifically is. And I'd like to ask, who wants to say what the actual mechanics of meditation is to them, in your own words? Who can just describe what actual meditation is? Because I think we all have something a little bit different.
Well, I just sit down and become quiet and then just go. And
go where or how?
Wherever it takes me, or when too much chatter comes, then I push it out. It comes again, of course. But I have, right now, I'm not very much in meditation. I have done years ago where I would sit for an hour and I didn't want to stop because it was just so peaceful.
Oh, you sat for an hour quietly?
Yeah.
That's much longer than most people can sit quietly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm not doing that now.
Okay.
So I have to rest.
The process of meditation.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to share their process of meditation?
Oh, well, becoming still in your body
Okay.
first, and still in the mind after that.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah.
Without falling asleep.
That's very true. That's why you're taught to have an erect spine and to not do it laying down like I try to do sometimes. It doesn't never work. So I.K. Taimni in the Science of Yoga, he breaks the meditation process down into three distinct parts. And we've kind of modified it just a little bit to make more sense to us, and we think it's easier to explain. I have a lot of friends that are just getting into their exploration of theosophy and of spiritual studies, so we try to make it as easy as possible. I find that these three stages of the meditation process is very, very simple to understand. So the translation from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the meditation process as a whole is referred to as samyama. That's the meditation process, samyama. In Sanskrit terms, the sub-phases are dharana, first phase, dhyana, second phase, and then samadhi, which is the pinnacle of meditation, the most exalted state of consciousness reached through meditation. As a literal translation, Taimni gives concentration as dharana, the first stage, concentration. Dhyana, the second stage, he translates to meditation, which doesn't necessarily make so much sense to us, and I'll explain in a second. So concentration, meditation, and then he translates samadhi to contemplation. So what we've done to make this make a little bit more cohesive sense is we changed the second two. So concentration makes a lot of sense to me to be the first phase of meditation. In order to meditate, we need to learn how to concentrate. So what we just said, stilling the body and stilling the mind, you said mind chatter comes in, that's correct, it always does, we're all normal humans. So we have to learn how to focus the mind and still the mind chatter, and once we can actually concentrate on one idea, one person, a candle flame, the sound vibrations in our ears of a meditation, of a singing bowl, one thing, being able to focus is the first stage, it's a form of meditation. That's why Hatha Yoga or Tai Chi or Qigong is a form of meditation, because you're focused on the body, on one thing. Your mind isn't just running like a wild pack of horses free. So concentration. Then contemplation, where we're not completely gone from the physical world. We haven't reached samadhi, but we are nearing the realm of the non-physical. Our consciousness is still in the physical world. We still have an idea or a concept or a person in mind that we're focusing on, but we're accessing some higher realm, and we start to receive some type of intuition, some type of perhaps answers or insight into this thing we're focusing on, whether it's a challenge at work or a human being, or if we're sending love to someone. There's something else that's special that's coming into this focused concentration, and we like to call that the contemplation phase. So concentration, contemplation, and by the way, answers to problems come during that phase also. This is where we can solve life issues, where we can figure out our clues for our life plan. This is where the goods happen before we actually reach the most exalted plane, which not a lot of us do. I hope to at some point. Samadhi. So concentration, contemplation, and then samadhi. Those three subphases are what comprise meditation. And before we can go to the second, we have to work on the first. The very first step that I always tell people is learn how to focus. It's so difficult to focus these days, especially with television programs, radio. Children that are being diagnosed with ADD, 8 children out of 10 children are diagnosed with ADD. That means that they can't sit. Imagine trying to meditate. So focus is so important.
Yeah. Well, I should have been sitting where you are. All right. Well, I think our time is up now, but well, I hope you got a few good ideas. Our goal is to plant some seeds, and as I say, all of it is contained in our book. We're going to leave a copy of it for your library, and that can be. We have one extra copy if anyone wants to buy it. It's $15, and if anyone else wants a copy, we'll be glad to ship it to you for the same price. We'll even pay the postage for you. So if you're interested in getting a copy, just give us a name and address, and we'll ship it to you. And it's also available in all of the ebook formats: Kindle, Nook, and iTunes.